Now we're going to be finding the vertex using the completing the square method. So up to now, the questions that we've done, they were already in a form that we can quickly identify the vertex. Yeah, so remember how the vertex was very easy to find? But sometimes the equation, the form of the equation that they give us is probably an expanded out form, which means we have to figure out a way to find the vertex easily. So we're going to figure out how to change that equation into a form that we can quickly identify the vertex. Okay, so that method is usually called the completing the square method. You probably already learned this, and this is the method we use to try to convert an equation or a quadratic equation into a form of the questions that we had in the previous questions. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Starting from here, and there's the graph over there where the vertex has been shifted. So the graph has been translated. See how it's gone to B to the right and C units up. Okay, so the vertex is definitely going to be somewhere out of 0, 0. And the vertex of this form, y equals to a, x minus b squared plus c. Now this is the form that we've done in the previous section where we learnt when the vertex has changed, we can quickly identify the vertex and then we can draw the graph. Now this form, so therefore, should be pretty familiar for you. Remember how with this kind of form I said look at this part for the x coordinate of the vertex and look at this part for the y coordinate of the vertex. And the reason for that is because if it says minus b, if it's minus some number, we're shifting left or right, right? So if b is positive, it will be x minus some number, which means we're shifting to the right. Okay, but if b is a negative number, say, I don't know, negative 2, this inside will be x plus 2, right? Because negative makes a positive, so x plus 2 means we're shifting to the left. Yeah, so either way, shifting left or right, that determines the x coordinate of the vertex, doesn't it? So in this case, the x coordinate would simply be b. Okay, so remember how I told you if this is a negative, change it to a positive. If it's a positive, change it to a negative. Remember that, right? So this one determines the x coordinate, whereas this number here, c, that we're just adding to the whole equation, it means we're lifting up. Okay, if c is negative, it would lift down, or sorry, shift down. So this determines the y coordinate because it shifts. It tells us where it shifts up or down, right? The vertical way. So that determines the y coordinate of the vertex. So if this is plus c, c will just be the y coordinate of the vertex. Okay, so, and remember a is just the coefficient, so it just determines how wide or skinny it is, so that doesn't really matter in this section where we're looking for the vertex. So don't worry too much about what this is, okay? Just these are the ones that you're going to be considering about. Okay, so the questions that we're going to be doing are not going to be in this form. So I'm going to show you how to make it into this form using our completing the square method. Okay, so let's try some questions. Okay, question 21 says, find the vertex of y equals to x squared plus 4x plus 1 by completing the square. Okay, so I'm going to start off for part A, finding the vertex. Now, as you can see, guys, this is in an expanded out form. So our task is to use completing the square to make that into a form that we can quickly identify the vertex. Okay, so before I start this, guys, make sure you do know what completing the square is. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about completing the square, you must go back to the other video that I talked about completing the square. Okay? So you must revise your knowledge of completing the square first to do this. Otherwise, you'll probably be a bit confused. Okay? So I will explain little bits by bits on what it is, but make sure you do have the background knowledge. Okay? So I'll give you a little thing about the completing the square, which you guys all should know already. Now, completing the square is based on this little rule, b divided by 2 squared. Now, b is the coefficient of x, right? So b is the coefficient of x, so in this case, it's going to be 4. All right, so I'll show you what I'm going to do. What I'm going to start off is by doing y equals to x squared plus 4x. So up to here, it's just same as this part, just right up to x squared plus 4x as it is. And then now I'm going to apply this rule. So b is 4, the coefficient of x. You divide it by 2, which becomes 2, and then you square it, which becomes 4. So here, that's why I'm adding 4. Okay, so I add that number 4. But remember guys, I can't just randomly add a number to an equation. Make sure you subtract it back, so eventually it's the same as the original equation. Okay, so if I'm adding 4, you subtract it back, and then you add your remaining constant. Okay, so 1. So now that I've done that, I can group the first 3 terms, x squared plus 4x plus 4, and factorize that into a perfect square, which is the purpose of completing the square method. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 is, you guys should all know that it's x plus 2 squared. Okay, so x plus 2 squared is what it becomes, and you should say that minus 4 plus 1 is minus 3. Okay, so hopefully that was easy, and hopefully this is all just a bit of revision for you. Okay, so guys, does this look familiar? I think this form is actually pretty familiar for you because this is the form where we can identify the vertex. Remember, it's something squared minus a number, which means this is the point, this is the number we're going to concentrate on finding the x coordinate of the vertex, and this is for the y coordinate of the vertex. So the vertex is simply -2, -3. So remember here guys, if it's a positive number, we change it into a negative. Okay, so plus 2 becomes a -2, and this -3 just goes straight into the y coordinate. Okay, and if you want a little bit more explanation on why this is, remember, if it's plus 2, we're talking about left or right. So it's plus 2, it means shifting to the left by 2 units, right? So that's why the x becomes -2. And then -3 means we're shifting down by 3 units. So that's why we're having -3 into our y coordinate. Okay, but I'm not going to explain that too much from now on. You should know that this identifies the x, this identifies the y. So that's simply the answer to this part. Okay, so just what I did was apply the completing the square method. So that's part A. So I'm just going to plot it in. Okay. Now B says find the y-intercept. Easy, just sub in x equals to 0. So that's the y-intercept. I just subbed x equals to 0, and you should just be left with 1. So the coordinates of the y-intercept is 0, 1. So just plot that in as well. Okay, so we know that the graph will pass through those 2 points. Now to sketch the graph, well this one, if that's the vertex and the y-intercept is there, obviously it's just going to look like that. Okay, so I don't have to really discuss much on concavity, okay, because it's definitely going to be concave up, happy face, because that's the vertex and that's the y-intercept, and that's the only way the graph works. Does that make sense, guys? So hopefully that wasn't too bad. That's what we're going to be doing for the next few questions. Okay, so follow along. Question 22A, okay, exactly same question. The only difference is the equation. Okay, so this time we have a different type of equation, but I'm still going to apply my completing the square method. Okay, so I'm going to start by doing the same thing. I'm going to write the first 2 terms, x squared minus 6x as it is, and then I apply the completing the square rule. So B, in this case, it's -6 because that's the coefficient of x. So -6 divided by 2 is -3, and then -3 squared is +9. Okay, so make sure this outcome is always positive. Okay, because whenever we square something, it's positive. So it's +9, so if you add something, you must subtract it back, so it's like the original equation, and then you add your other constant, the remaining constant. Okay, and then you can group the first 3 terms like this. So x squared minus 6x plus 9, you should all know how to make that into a complete square, perfect square. It becomes x minus 3, the whole thing squared. Okay, so if this is negative, just a little revision, if that's a negative, remember that's also a negative, right? But I'm not going to explain that too much in depth because you all should already know. And then minus 9 plus 6 is minus 3. Okay, so we've got it in that decent form again. So guys, you guys can tell me the vertex. So you look at this to find the x coordinate and this to find the y coordinate. So what is it going to be? This, because it's -3, the x1 becomes +3. And because it's -3, it goes into the y coordinate as it is. So the coordinates of the vertex is 3, -3. Okay, so just plot that in and that will be your answer. Alright, so again, I think that was pretty simple. That was question 22A. And then B, again, we're going to find the y-intercept. So just sub in x equals to 0. If that becomes 0, the remaining is 6. So the y-intercept is 0, 6. So I'm just going to plot that in. Alright, because the final one, part C, will ask us to sketch the graph. So that's the vertex. It will pass through the y-intercept. And because the coefficient of x squared is positive, we know that it's going to be concave up. Just join them, and that will be your answer. Simple, isn't it? 23, okay, again, same thing. So see how this is getting a bit more repetitive. So we've got a new equation, and we're going to complete the square again. So I'm going to write x squared plus 8x as it is, and then you see that b is the coefficient of x, which is 8 in this case. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So I'm adding 16 and subtracting 16 back. And then just add your remaining constant. And then just group the first 3 terms, and that will be a complete square as x plus 4, the whole thing squared. Okay, x plus 4 squared. And then minus 16 plus 8 is minus 8. So I've got the form again. What's the vertex? Minus 4, minus 8. So the y stays as it is, but the x just changed the sign, and that's just it. Okay, so minus 4, minus 8. Just plot that in. Okay, guys? That's pretty much it for A. And then B, find the y-intercept. Sub in x equals to 0, and you should get 8 as y. So the coordinates will be 0, 8. So let's plot that in. And then, of course, when you're sketching the graph, you just join them, and definitely it's going to be concave up. So it looks like that. Okay? There's no way this will be concave down, because otherwise we can't make that the vertex and that the y-intercept. So it's definitely concave up, right? So I don't have to explain that too much. And that's it. That's 23. 24. Okay, similar thing. Now, before I continue on with this question, guys, and this is another thing you all should already know, okay, from your basic completing the square knowledge. When you're trying to complete the square, the coefficient of x squared must be a non-negative number. It must be a positive number, and it must not be anything else other than 1. So basically, it must be 1. The only exception for completing the square method is the coefficient of x squared must be positive 1. Okay, so if the coefficient is anything else other than negative 1, you're going to try to make it, like trying to factorize it and make the coefficient 1. So in this case, I'm going to actually take out my negative, because I don't want x squared to have a negative coefficient. So I took out the negative, and then I just left the constant here, because the constant, I just have to subtract it eventually at the end, don't I? So I'm not going to worry too much about the constant at the end. But this first 2 terms, I'm going to factorize by negative, so it becomes positive x squared minus 4x. And let's close the bracket and just subtract your constant. And then I'll try to complete the square with just this inside part. Okay? So let's just go ahead and do the b divided by 2 squared. So in this case, guys, what's b? The coefficient of x, which is negative 4. Okay? Not positive 4, negative 4. Okay? So let's try. So it's going to be negative, so keep the negative outside, x squared minus 4x, so leave those 2 terms as it is. And then negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So 4 and then minus 4. Okay, add 4 and then subtract 4 like we did for the previous 2 questions. And then just subtract your thingo, the constant at the end. And then I'm going to factorize this part. So it's going to be, I just grouped them together. So it's going to be minus this whole thing, x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then I'm trying to expand out the brackets. So I'm trying to go minus 4, which becomes plus 4. So I can take that out of the bracket. And the reason for that is I just want to gather the constants together. Okay, so you see how I did that? I just expanded out the brackets a little bit. So I did minus 4, so it becomes plus 4. So this one, guys, becomes, keep the negative outside. This part just becomes x minus 2, the whole thing squared. Okay, just your perfect square. And then plus 4 minus 1 is positive 3. Okay, so we've got that form again. So this one took a little bit more steps because of the negative. Alright, so that's what it is. So again, you look at this one for the x-coordinate of the vertex and this for the y-coordinate of the vertex. So what's the vertex? Simply positive 2, positive 3, and that's your vertex. So that's your plotted in vertex. Okay, so take a look at that. So it wasn't anything different, it was just that I factorized by negative because I don't want to have a negative in it. Now find the y-intercept, just sub in x equals to 0, you should be left with negative 1. So 0, negative 1 is your y-intercept. Just plot it in. And then see, we're going to sketch the graph. And guys, what does a negative x squared indicate? It's concave down. The coefficient of a negative means it's concave down, so that's what it looks like. Okay. 25, find the vertex of this equation. Okay. Now, I hope you guys can tell me that this one, we can't do the completing the square method straight away because x squared has a coefficient of something that is not positive 1. It's 2. It's not positive 1. Okay, so what do we have to do this time? So this time, I'm going to factorize by 2 because I don't want 2. I want 1 as the coefficient of x squared. So again, I just left the constant at the very end, so I'm not going to factorize that. I'll just leave that out. And then this part, I'll factorize by 2. So take 2 out, I'll have x squared minus 4x left inside the brackets. Okay? And then for this part, I'll apply my completing the square. This time, what's b? b is negative 4. Alright, so let's try to apply this with negative 4 as b. So it's going to be, keep the 2 outside, x squared minus 4x, leave that as it is. And then negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, negative 2 squared is positive 4. So you add 4 and then subtract 4, as we always do. And then just keep your constant at the end. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did in the previous question. I'm going to try to expand it out a little bit so I can keep the first 3 terms inside the bracket. And I'm just going to expand the 2 with the negative 4. So 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. And then plus 5, sorry. Because I want to gather the constants together. So let's factorize this part as a complete square. It's going to be keep the 2 outside. And this part is x minus 2 squared. And then minus 8 plus 5 is negative 3. So again, we've got that form that we can quickly identify the vertex. So look at this for the x-coordinate of the vertex and that for the y-coordinate of the vertex. Positive 2, negative 3 is our vertex. So just plot it in. And that's it. Okay? And guys, what does the 2 indicate? What does this 2 indicate? Remember from our previous section, we've learnt that that is the coefficient of this whole equation. So if it's 2, it's greater than 1, which means the graph should be a little bit more thinner than usual. Okay? But don't worry about that too much because we can identify what the graph looks like after we find the intercepts, which I'll explain in the next part. In part B. Part B says find the y-intercept. Just sub in x equals to 0. If those all become 0, we have left with 5. So the coordinates of the y-intercept is 0, 5. So just plot that in. Okay, so in part C, you're going to join those points and find the graph. That will be what it looks like. Okay, so even if I don't really consider too much about that coefficient of 2, because the y-intercept is quite high relative to the vertex, it just automatically becomes quite slim, okay? And that's because of that coefficient, okay? So that's the answer to question 25. And 26, find the vertex of this by completing the square. Okay, guys, you should definitely realize the coefficient of x squared is not positive 1, it's negative 3. So we're going to factorize by negative 3. So keep your constant outside. I'm just going to factorize the first 2 terms by negative 3. So we'll have positive x squared plus 2x left, just factorizing. And then apply your completing the square method. So b in this case is 2. So I'm going to do x squared plus 2x, leave it as it is. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 1 squared is 1. So you add 1 and subtract 1. Okay? So I'm going to expand it out a little bit. Keep the first 3 terms inside the bracket. like that. And I'm going to expand the negative 3 with the negative 1. So negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. And then of course minus 4. Okay, so let's factorize. This part becomes x plus 1 squared, a perfect square, and positive 3 minus 4 is negative 1. So you guys should be very used to this method now. So now we can identify the vertex. So you look at this for the x coordinate and that for the y coordinate. So x coordinate is negative 1 and the y coordinate is negative 1. Just plot it in. Okay, and again, this negative 3, because it's negative, you know that it's going to be concave down, and because it's a 3, it's a number greater than 1, it's going to be a little bit more slim or thinner. Okay, so, but again, don't worry too much about that because you can draw the graph after you find your intercept. So B, find the y-intercept, just sub in x equals to 0. You should get negative 4. So 0, negative 4 is the coordinates of the y-intercept. Just plot it in. And in part C, we're going to sketch the graph. And I told you it's going to be concave down because of that negative coefficient of x squared. So it's simply going to look like that. And that's it. Okay, so basically all you needed was the vertex and the y-intercept. Y-intercept is very, very straightforward. But the vertex, just apply your completing the square method.